Hello again YouTube, Pan here. So, what's in the purse this week? And the answer is florins! So, I'm not actually going to be talking too much about florins this time, but what I want to do is I want to use these as a way of looking at the history of British silver coinage, and also as a bit of an illustration of how inflation works over time. So, if we go back to the Victorian period, and we have here a godless florin from 1849. I've talked about this before. It's a very nice coin that I'm very fond of. So a florin is worth 2 shillings, 1/10 of a pound, and this, as with all silver currency from the kind of Middle Ages up to 1920 or 1921, is sterling silver, so 92.5% pure. So this is a relatively pure silver coin. Like, certainly it was, considered a pretty pure silver coin by the standards of the day, where even the term coin silver means like 90% pure. So that's what we have to begin with, and that's what we had for hundreds of years. And then around 1920, 1921, we had a changeover. So we have then the new silver currency. And the most notable thing about this is that the silver content drops from 92.5% to 50%. And these 50% silver coins, you can generally spot them a mile away. Colour balance is really weird, so it may not come through very well on this video. But first and foremost, they're just generally less shiny than the 92.5%. So the sterling silver is just generally kind of a much cleaner colour. Whereas I always see the 50% silver coins as being much more of a kind of a duller colour, and even slightly green is how I always see it. It always seems kind of murky. This was because of the manganese that was used as a way of making up the bulk of the coin. So it's 50% silver, some large percentage manganese, and then some fractions of something else. But obviously around the time of the changeover, there was no distinction made between them. So if you had gone to a shop with this coin and used it to spend some money on something, you'd be getting the same value as this coin here, even though this one has much more of a silver content to it. And you can see they kept the size more or less identical. The 50% silver one is a little bigger, but they would have been, pretty easily interchangeable for most people using them at the time. And that continued for about 25, 26 years until this is actually one of the last few years where we still had silver in our currency. So this one here with George VI is dated 1946. And 1947 was the year in which the currency changed to no longer have any silver in it at all. So after this year, we just switched over entirely to cupro nickel for our coinage. We were still using florins, we were still using shillings and pence, shillings and crowns and pounds, until the 1960s, in fact. And in the 1960s we had decimalisation, and decimalisation meant that what had been a florin before, so 2 shillings, or as some of the earlier versions said, 1/10 of a pound, became 10 new pence. And again, you can see the changeover would have been pretty smooth in terms of people seeing these two as being very, very similar. So if you look at them side on, they're a very similar thickness and style on the side. The diameter is almost completely identical. So it would have been just a change in the stamping, but the actual way that the coin would have felt in the hand would have been more or less identical. So then we have decimalisation, and at this point we're on to completely cupro-nickel coins. So our florins go down there, and actually for a quite an extended period you could actually find both new pence and shillings and florins in your change. So the 50 pence piece, and I have a lovely example here from Silver Forum member who I mentioned that I was looking for one of these 1973 EEC commemorative 50 pence pieces, and they very generously said, "Oh, I have one," and just popped in an envelope to me, which is really lovely. So thank you, Silver Forum member Blab, that was really nice of you. This particular 50 pence piece, yes, it's to do with the European Economic Community, but also this is explicitly mentioned in the kids' book The Queen's Nose. In that particular story, a young girl is given a magical 50 pence piece, and it's one that has this ring of hands on the outside of it. And actually, if you notice, there's one hand on one side is noticeably kind of thinner, more delicate, and it's clearly more of a feminine hand than the rest of the ones. And anyway, yes, the magical 50 pence piece in that particular story was for granting wishes. Now there wasn't a pre-decimal equivalent to this. There had been a plan to introduce a 2-crown coin, and it really says a lot that a crown coin, which is nearly an ounce of silver and is bigger than even this initial 50 pence piece, was by this point going to be worth only 25 pence, so half of what one of these cupro-nickel coins would be worth. So we move on to the decimal system, and we have the 10 pence pieces, and we have 10 pence pieces and florins being basically interchangeable until, well, actually I think they were in circulation until the early 1990s. They were generally both considered interchangeable. I mean, they fell out of use quite quickly and the 10 pence pieces took their place. And then the next stage happened, which was that we had the 10 pence coins and then they got smaller. So this here is a 1968? So I think that's first year of decimalisation. And the new 10 pence pieces were considerably smaller, still made of cupro-nickel, but again we're seeing, not exactly a debasement, but we're seeing kind of a reduction in the coin, reflecting a reduction in the value of what that unit of currency means. So modern 10 pence pieces will still have the same pattern on the reverse, well, depending on the year, because there is the partial shield design on the most modern ones. So same pattern on the reverse, and obviously a portrait of the Queen on the obverse, but physically smaller. And actually, I've heard relatively recently that they're actually planning on taking it the next step further, which is they've basically decided that cupro-nickel is too expensive for making 10 pence pieces. So they're actually going to move over to making them out of steel and plating them with nickel. Which is kind of fascinating that we've gone from something that's 92.5% pure silver down to something that's basically going to be smaller than this and basically just made of steel. And if ever you wanted a very physical way of looking at what inflation looks like over a 100+ year period, there you go. Florins, 10 pence pieces. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have your own thoughts on this or inflation in general, please feel free to drop a comment in the space below. That's it for now.